Hello, everyone around the world, especially hello to the one also that joined our morning session today. Welcome to this special session and this special workshop on how to foster the transformation in agriculture. So this workshop is organized by Agricultural Systems of the Future, which is a research program funded by the German Ministry of Research and Education. So for more information about us, please visit our website and get in contact with us on social media. You find our Twitter handle and also our web address written on the right corner of the slide that is just in front of you. Also, you find all the contact information posted in the chat here, in this Zoom chat already. So I'm Philip Albers. I'm a project manager at the Coordination Office, Agricultural Systems of the Future, which is located at the Leibniz Institute of Vegetable and Ornamental Crops, close to Berlin, Germany. And together with my colleague, Monika Schreiner, who coordinates this funding program, I will be moderating this breakout session. So we are obviously a bit short on time, but still we are eager to hear from all of you in our Q&A session, which I hope we managed to do. So if you have questions later to our panel, please submit your questions in the chat, ideally by writing your name and your question and to whom you address your questions. So with that, I give the word to my colleague, Monika Schreiner.
Yes, so after all this arrangement, let's go to business. Having our topic in mind, we are from Agricultural Systems of the Future, we are convinced that the future design of agricultural systems will be the key for the future of our planet and for the future of our civilization. And to address all these social and environmental challenges, we think we have to reboot and to reimagine how we produce our food and how we consume our food. And applying economic aspects, bioeconomic aspects in the already existing agri-food supply systems, we think there will be various possibilities of solution pathways to enhance biodiversity, to use more new food sources and new protein alternatives, and to really establish a broad range of smart farming as well as complete circular farming systems. So within the next hour, we would like to highlight or to define barriers and incentives to bring more bioeconomy in agricultural systems, and to discuss with our experts how could we really foster this kind of transformation into agriculture. Okay, Philip.
Yeah, thanks, Monika. So, and for that, we have invited 4 experts, which I would briefly like to introduce. We have Christian Huyck, who is Scientific Director Agriculture at INRAE, the French National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment. And Edeltraud Günther, who is Director at the United Nations University Institute for Integrated Management of Material Fluxes and Resources. Johannes Isselstein, Professor at the University of Göttingen and Head of the Institute of Grassland Sciences, and Sandra Schwindenhammer from the University of Gießen and the Institute for Political Sciences. So with this short introduction, I would already like to hand over to our first speaker, who's Christian Huyck. He will give us insights into especially the new strategic orientation of INRAE, and tell us what priority areas INRAE defines for the transformation of agriculture for the next decade. So with this, Christian, we are very much looking forward to your talk. The screen is yours. I will click forward for you, okay?
Thank you very much, Philip, for this introduction, and thank you to you and Monika for setting the scene. I will first give a very brief introduction on what is INRAE today, and then what are our strategic priorities for the coming years, and how we aim at transforming agriculture and meeting the long-term expectation of all societies. So if you go to the next slide, it's just this is next, please. This is just in a few figures what INRAE is like. So it's bit more than 11,000 permanent staff. We have on the top of that quite a substantial number of postdoc and PhD students, about €1 billion of turnover. We are scattered all over France, both in the metropolitan France and overseas, with nearly 270 research unit, experimental unit, and support unit, and a lot of partnerships, both on the socio-economic side, so with industries, companies, and farmers organization, and also partnership with local universities, and also many collaborative work with international or European organizations. On the next slide, in terms of production, in fact, as we are covering agriculture, including forestry, food, and environment, in fact, we have a very broad scope, and so we are, in terms of number of scientific publication, we are number one as a specialized research organization on these 3 domains. Number 2 in agricultural science, number 4 in plant and animal sciences, or more biology, fundamental biology, and 11 in ecology and environment. So if we go on the next slide, and it is the last slide of presentation. In fact, we have 14 scientific divisions that are mainly organized according to disciplines. So we are covering plant production, animal production, also forestry, environment, water quality, and we are covering the social and economic sciences. So quite a wide range. And also I forgot to mention food and food processing. So very broad scope that we are running in a lot of units, as I mentioned, and many, about 70% of these units are joint unit with other research organization or with universities. Now, if you go on the next slide, in fact, the missions of INRAE, as many research organizations, but maybe a bit beyond, is that we have the first mission is to produce new knowledge, because this is why we are a research organization. So the product of that is scientific publication. We are contributing to innovations, and this means that we have many partnerships with industries, projects with technical institutes, working with networks of farmers groups. On the other side, we are supporting public policies by production of expertise, but also direct support. And this is the result of that is expertise and prospect studies for the French ministries and also for Europe. At the European level, we are working with the Commission and the Parliament. And we also have a few units that are directly implementing public policies. For instance, variety registration is run by a group where INRAE is strongly involved. And the last dimension of our mission is to work and to be involved in participatory and open sciences. This is really an increasing trend. And this led to 2 things. The first is that we are involved in the living lab strategies and running what is called in France, what is named in France, territoire d'innovation, that are very broad place-based living labs. And the other side is that we have a clear open data policy for all our research. So this is our mission. And now if we move to the topic of today, excuse me for this big complex picture, but I'm going to try to be clear. In fact, it's the way we see our main structure of research in relationship with the key objectives that are stressed in the Green Deal, for instance, at the European level. And we work this. This is one way to see whether the EU agriculture is on the right track, or whether it should be challenged and modified. The key objectives are climate, and there is a huge challenge to adapt to the climate, but to mitigate the climate and to avoid to have a higher or more increase in mean temperature than today. We have to ensure human health, so which means enough food provision in terms of quantity of energy, in terms of quantity and quality of protein, as it was mentioned on the slide by Monica. And we have to ensure a clear preservation of the environment and of biodiversity. And it's even more than preserving, it's restoring environment and restoring biodiversity. And to achieve that, in fact, we can identify three main levers. The first is to work and to use agroecological farming production method, where you have a direct effect on the pesticide and fertilizer reduction, on the greenhouse gas emission, on carbon sequestration, with a question mark regarding land use, because if we have a slight decrease in the biomass production per acreage, this could have a negative effect on land use. The second big lever and second big aspect is that how the diet are going to change. In fact, there are two aspects, two dimensions on that. The first is the balance between animal product and plant product, and especially in terms of protein. Today in Europe, we have about 60% of our protein that are from animal source, and how this could change. And it will not increase, so the share of animal protein will decrease. And this will have an impact on the animal herd, and especially the cattle size, but also on pig and poultry size. And this will have a direct effect on land use, as this is going to change. But it will have a strong effect on climate and a very strong effect on human health. And the last point is about waste reduction. All the survey in Europe are showing that up to 1/3 of the biomass is lost in the consumption or in the processing. And this is clearly a huge gap to achieve climate, to achieve environment preservation. So, as you can see, in fact, our three clear objectives are targeting farming system, analyzing diet, and working on bioeconomy and circular economy. So if you move to the next slide, we are building our strategic plan. And so this is not final, but is the main priorities that they are defined, and they will not change anyway, but they are in the process of being completely settled and fixed with the all ministries. It has been built with a lot of internal, external consultation, also with international committees, and it will be at the base of our contract with the Ministry of Research and Agriculture. We have five priority orientation on climate, diversity and risk, on agroecology transition for food and agriculture, on bioeconomy and sustainable use of resource, on global health, and also one item on digital aspects for transition. And we will have three operational priorities that are first is on innovation and expertise. This is what I mentioned a few slides before. We are putting a lot of pressure for increasing our cooperation with universities, with Europe, and with the international side, and also raising something that is more present in the industry, but we want to implement this internally, is on everything related with social and environmental responsibility. When we give this presentation very flat, it can be we do not see what are the key trends behind this. In fact, what you can underline is that there is a central tension between the need. The central tension is on the need to conciliate productive issues, economic issues, and environmental issues of the agri-food system. And if you go beyond, in fact, these are the various sustainable development goals can be conciliated. And they tend to be negatively correlated, all these aspects. And we have to explore what are the levers, what are the processes that are making it possible to combine them positively, what you can name exploring convexities. And the analysis along this is, the analysis is done along several axes. The first one is that we have to conciliate private good and public good, or common good, depending. What is very important to take on board is that there is a very strong diachrony of the effect. Some effects you can see immediately, mainly productive and economic issues, while the environmental impact or environmental performance are only seen on the long term. And the third axis is that we must consider the long term. In other words, what is our responsibility for the future generations? And this is something that is very important for us as a public institute, is to have in mind what is going to be our service to the next generation. And one thing that is not underlined often very clearly is that in all our strategy, especially when we talk about production and use of biomass, we are clearly in favor of an approach of land sharing as the main mode of land use, instead of land sparing that is sometimes put in the forefront by several research organizations. If you move to the next slide, and it is nearly at the end, if we analyze how we are working on or in agreement with the European Green Deal, in fact, this is a brief summary of the Green Deal and the bioeconomy. And if you go on the next, in fact, the key or key priorities that we proposed to the when we prepared your Horizon Europe is in fact working on everything is related to a bioeconomy and sustainable use of the biomass that is produced, and our priorities are regarding carbon neutral and climate resistant agri-food, our sustainable livestock for the future, are related to a chemical pesticide-free agriculture, so something that is really using all the natural regulation made possible by agroecology, and of course, healthier and sustainable diet. But the point is that they must be healthier and sustainable for everyone, for all. And I think that was all I wanted to say. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for this great overview. I will directly continue with Edeltraud's talk. Let me just share my screen once again.
Thank you very much. And while you are sharing, you see I represent here the United Nations University, the Institute for Integrated Management of Material Fluxes and of Resources. And I will give you my perspective as a business researcher to this topic, how to foster the transformation in agriculture. Next slide, please. So we collected many studies on the question, does a transformation towards a green economy pay? And what you see here is that it's just a vote counting where we counted positive significant, negative significant studies. And then we realized, yes, the positive dominate the negative, but what we see in the middle, there are many where we cannot tell whether it pays or not. Next slide, please. And then we started identifying barriers. In that case, a very specific question for adaptation to climate change. And we identified 5 different areas, no clear objective. And what you presented, Christian, I think was already very nicely connected to this. You need clear objectives that you want to follow. There is a lack of processes, clear rules, clear guidelines, for example, for procurement, for specific treatments, lack of resources, financial, human resources. You also mentioned the social dimension, lack of knowledge and lack of incentives. Next slide, please. And then we could connect them to different stakeholders that are relevant in this process on different level. So we always, as business researchers, take the perspective in this case of a farm or of a food company, the organization in the middle, but we have external stakeholders, and we also have teams, specific teams in the company, for example, or also on a farm company, and also on the individual level. We have different knowledge backgrounds, for example. Next slide, please. And then we said, okay, we know there are many cases where we do not know how it pays. There are many barriers. And therefore, we then said we have to change our way of thinking. And this connects to your slide 7 in the previous presentation, where you also had the different avenues to develop new solutions. And one was very specifically mentioned, waste reduction. And I would like to talk today about this specific question of how to reduce waste and how to also change the thinking regarding to waste in the agri-food systems. And there we can think of services, of products. You also referred to this. We have different customer segments. So it's not that we only focus on the product, but that we think of different customers, and we also need different relationships. We can create values on different levels. We can use different channels, can use different resources that we also identify. For example, in which case we can use wastewater, what plant can be irrigated with which type of wastewater, to be very specific. And then we can go to the value capture side, where we look for the cost structure, where we can save costs, but also for revenue streams. So maybe some customer segments are willing to pay a higher price if they know that the farming changed. Next slide, please. And there are different ways, 3 ways, technological ways, and I will present one to you specifically on the question to create value from waste, but also social. You mentioned consumption patterns. That is actually also something that we can think of, encourage sufficiency, or also adopt a stewardship role, that we really change our mindsets. But we also can develop organizational solutions so that we, for example, organize the farms in a different way. And if you go to the next slide, you find a long list. And as I assume that you get the slides, I just decided to integrate the slide where you see many different opportunities. And here, for example, for organizational innovations and business models, cooperatives are a typical solution in farming, for example. Or what I mentioned already, create value from waste, that we really think of using waste in the food production and also using, for example, wastewater for irrigation. Next slide. And I brought you just 2 examples. One is we again use this structure I presented already in a case for food production in Namibia. And there we looked how we could use wastewater for irrigation, specifically reduce water cost in arid areas, and turn wastewater for which you would have to pay into a value. Next slide. And there we applied a method that I think is worthwhile looking at. Its method is called material flow cost accounting. There is an ISO standard, ISO 14051. And the change in mindset is exactly that you do not think of waste or wastewater as a problem that has to be solved, but you think in the business model and ask, how do I have to design the treatment in order to be able to irrigate specific areas, whether it's agricultural land or whether you use it, for example, in the case of Namibia. The other alternative was then tourism. If you just irrigate a lawn, then you have different quality levels. So thinking in waste as a resource is the idea behind this method. And then you can also see that then you do not only allocate the waste to the product where it comes from, but to the new product or new service you then deliver. Next slide, please. We also applied this way of thinking in Mexico, where we had a project on water reuse in the Mezquital Valley, where we had an area that was irrigated with untreated wastewater for many decades, almost 100 years. And there the starting point was actually not a new business model for using wastewater, but public health issues, environmental issues due to pollution and also soil contamination. And then next slide, please. We looked at possible options to make value of this wastewater. And we identified the option to develop bioenergy. You are all familiar with this. Also compost that can then again go into the food production, but also wastewater and treated wastewater for irrigation. And there the design then matters, that you really then decide what quality do you need for specific plants, and then it's designed, you could say. Next slide. So this were examples related to wastewater, and here I have an example that is related to food production, berry juice. And there we work, it was an EU project under the Sustainable Food program. We analyzed berry juice production that also has a long history. And usually you produce juice, you have pomace, it's waste, and you want to get rid of it. And here again, we applied this method of material flow cost accounting together with engineers, with food engineers, and they developed new products. They used the fibers and used them in bakery products, for example, cakes, that could then go to the consumer. So we could reduce the waste. There are also other alternatives we looked at, for example, using the color in the cosmetics industry, using the antioxidants for functional food. So thinking of waste, it's again the same pattern, thinking of waste as a resource and developing new products within the agri-food system or without, like the cosmetics industry. And please, I think I have 2 or 3 more slides. What we then also calculated were really the costs in detail. I just displayed them here. So it's a very detailed analysis where you look at all the material you need, the fertilizer and so on, the energy you need, the system, you need machines, you have labor costs, and you have waste management costs, and then also other project materials we analyzed. Next slide, please. And then we did cost metrics. So we calculated the costs for the baseline scenario without waste usage, and then 2 alternatives where we closed the loop. And what you can see here is not as positive as we hoped in the beginning, that we will increase the profit. We did not increase the profit. We reduced it slightly in relation to the amount. And this is now in a stage where then the company said, well, it's a new business. We are not yet that far on our experience curve, and they have to improve, but they said, yeah, we will identify efficiency potentials. At least it's not really negative, and they are quite optimistic that they even can develop a positive business out of this. One scenario is berry pomace only, and the other is combined with apples. And we also, next slide, please, calculated the global warming potential, where we could see a significant impact of global warming potential in both scenarios, reducing the global warming potential in the first scenario and even having credits in the second scenario. And just another slide, we also then, designed that in a nicer way for the consumer, that they can also see their impact, the impact of this closing the loop. And then I would like to end with a slide that refers to the thinking we have here at Unio Flores related to the resource nexus. I think now I could show that we do not only focus on food when we do these analysis, but I touched on water, on soil, on energy, on the economic calculation, but also political issues matter here. And I also mentioned climate change. So in the end, it's not that you only optimize for one goal, but for multiple goals. And I hope I could show you with these few examples just possibilities how to make value out of waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this fascinating talk. So next we are going to hear two short impulse talks, and the first one we heard is an impulse talk from Johannes Isselstein from the University of Göttingen, who will give us an example of a research and development project to transform agriculture for the future, and that is the so-called green grass project. So Johannes, could you please give us your impulse talk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My statement is based on ideas and experiences from a collaborative transdisciplinary research project called Green Grass, where the intention is to fundamentally change pasture and livestock farming. We think there is a huge potential to meet agricultural production goals, while at the same time societal goals can be met. Animal welfare, biodiversity, and nature conservation, reduced environmental pollution, mitigating climate change, and so on. And far-reaching goals obviously require disruptive innovations, which then are the starting point of agricultural transition. The next slide, please. And this requires an active role of research in initiating and accelerating. There is consensus that many aspects of agricultural transition require large steps rather than incremental changes or developments. And research is responsible to make progress in this respect. The next slide. What is required for transformative research? Well, identifying and agreeing on the developmental goals is key to be successful. And it's not only research that develops ideas and innovation in their laboratory and then transfer or try to transfer the innovation into the farming practice. It's already about identifying the goals as a joint endeavor of research and practice, and this right from the start. And there is a strong, we learned that there is a strong incentive to involve society and politics to be backed with these ideas of a transformation process. And thirdly, the research is applied type of research, meaning that science is not only to serve science, what is generally expected from basic science, but scientific insight has to become relevant for society. Now, the example which we are working on, the next slide, please, is grassland farming. Ruminant livestock and grassland is of overriding importance for the agricultural business worldwide. 2/3 of the agricultural area is grassland, mainly managed by ruminants. And ruminants have shaped agricultural landscapes and their related ecosystem services. But nowadays, ruminants, in particular intensive dairy systems, often are disconnected from landscapes and are kept indoors, and services of grasslands are at risk. Now, this is the starting point of our idea, using advanced smart farming technologies to facilitate more grazing. And this is virtual fencing, remote sensing, information technology, and so forth. And the final slide. So we put together a bunch of various disciplines related with the agronomy of grazing system, with landscape ecology, with information technology, with people from the economy, but also the stakeholders, and all these disciplinary approaches to put forward the idea of more and improved grazing is being explored in living labs, which have already been mentioned today. And there we include various types of stakeholders, farmers, NGOs, politics, administration, markets, in order to develop the ideas and have a type of co-creation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So now I would like to hand over to our last final speaker for today, which is who is Sandra Schwinhauer, a political scientist and deputy coordinator of the SoSCult project. The SoSCult project follows a completely different vision of the transformation of agriculture. Sandra, could you please give us your vision, what SoSCult is about?
Yeah, thank you so much, Philip. It's a real pleasure to be here and to contribute to this exciting workshop on behalf of the SoSCult team. SoSCult is one of the 8 agricultural systems for the future Monica has introduced so perfectly this morning. And it is led by the Fraunhofer Institute for Environmental Safety and Energy Technology Umsicht. And we also apply a transdisciplinary approach. We connect 15 partners, you can see here on the bottom of the slide, from the natural and the social sciences, stakeholders from civil society, but also private companies. And here is illustrated the basic components of the SoSCult vision. SoSCult responds to long-term megatrends that currently challenge agricultural systems, urbanization, digitalization, and climate change, but also growing consumer demands for high quality, regional, and sustainable agricultural products. And SoSCult pursues a circular approach of nutrient recovery for urban agricultural production. We envision the connection of the wastewater treatment system, we have heard about it, and the agricultural production system. And for the future, SoSCult envisions the transformation of conventional treatment plants into so-called nutrient centers, which draw the essential resources for urban hydroponic plant cultivation from treated wastewater. And we are currently developing a demonstration nutrient center in the Ruhr metropolitan region in Germany, with an estimated production capacity of 40 tons of vegetables per year. And I invite you to visit our website. So these are the basic technological components of the SoSCult vision. But in one of the opening workshops to this conference, Carrot Clark from UNEP argued that technology change alone is not enough to reach the global 1.5 climate target. And regarding to SoSCult, I totally agree with her, because our finding from the political science sub-project in SoSCult, which are based on interviews and stakeholder seminars and online surveys, reveal that SoSCult itself is a potential bottom-up driver of political and societal transformation. And the SoSCult vision creates new nexus governance tasks. We have heard about them, especially when it comes to connecting wastewater treatment and food production. And in doing so, it substantiates the need for more policy integration. And it also reveals the need for more enhanced democratic legitimacy of such agricultural transformations. And in this regard, I'm very much looking forward to our upcoming discussions on how to manage such agricultural transformations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for this overview about the on the SoSCult project. So for our discussion, we have about 10 minutes left. So we are a little bit short on time. So I hope we manage to do that. So one thing I would like to pick up from the talks today, which I found also very interesting, was the approach of having living labs as co-creation spaces. So Christian mentioned this, but also Johannes in his talk. Christian, I would like to ask you the first question. So what do you think, what role do these places, these living labs play by fostering the transformation in agriculture?
Thank you for your question. It's a very important point. In fact, when you want transforming the system, and this has been also mentioned by Johannes and by Sandra, the technological push is not enough to induce a change. And if you refer to the lock-in theory developed by Frank Gills, he pointed that, in fact, there was two things that were making it possible to change a system that is at the equilibrium, what he called a locked situation, where you have all the partners being in equilibrium with each other. He said, in fact, you have the innovation that is coming from a niche. You can change the regulatory, the political landscape. And also, as you have several partners that are in equilibrium with each other, in fact, if you have additional partners coming in fact, the equilibrium is modified. And in fact, when you have, who are the others, the other partners who could come along? In fact, it's mainly the citizens and the consumers who have something to say. And when you take them on board, what is going to change is in the fact that they are going to carry with them another sense of what is common good and what is private good. In fact, all our systems that are in equilibrium are mainly in equilibrium according to economic issues. And in fact, when you have the citizens coming along, you have the common good being taken on board. But also there is another dimension, is that it depends where you are. What is making people being able to talk to each other and to discuss and to co-create means that they must have common ground. And when you develop a living lab, you are located somewhere. So you take on board the cultural issues, but also the context dependent. What is context dependent? You do not do the same thing where Johannes is, where you have these very nice hills and plenty of grassland. And you do not do the same when you are in the river Danube River, because where everything is flat, where you have grain crops. So you must take on board these aspects. And so it gives another aspect of the balance between common good and private good and common good. It also gives a sense of what is important for today and what is important for tomorrow. So in fact, by a living lab, it must take on board the diachrony that is present. And when you have this, in fact, you are then really starting to deal with difficult things, is how you share an information. Because if people have to discuss and to create something together, they must share something. They must share knowledge, which is not easy, because very often people working together have many items that are totally implicit, so never explained. When you have some new person coming in, you must make everything explicit. And this is where the digital issue is very important, because the digital issue is then going to reduce the information asymmetry among partners. So there is no living lab without a lot of digital issues. It's not digital technology such as drone or sensors everywhere. It's how you share, how you make the information available. So, and I will stop there. Living lab is a completely new way to take on board the diversity, the direct and indirect beneficiaries of something. But to make it successful means that you need time. And because you need time to get the same culture, and you need time to see a transformation. And this is not at all relevant with most of the timing we have when we run research. All the timing of research are run by the call for proposal every 3 years. And this is not compatible with the living lab. You will only see transformation on the very long term. But I definitely think that is really something that is completely new, and be a huge need for education, also for scientists on that topic.
Absolutely, I think we should all integrate these approaches much more in our research projects. Maybe it's something that also funding agencies should take much more into account, definitely. So Monica, I think you have the next question.
Yes, I think Christian mentioned one keyword, and that is the citizen or the consumer. And for my opinion, I think they are interested in functional food, and that is what was mentioned by Iltrud Günther. And so it's interesting to make value from waste. So do you think that there's a really high demand in industry and food industry that the use of bio-waste, of residues, and what could be an incentive to foster the bioeconomies to do that way of, yes, using byproducts for food or for adding value?
So this question goes to me?
Yes, it's for you.
Okay, thank you very
yes,
much.
Of course.
So thank you very much. It's
very pompous, very interesting, the project, yes?
Yeah, actually, and you know what? So I think, yes, I thought the same. And what I think is the major problem, you already asked for an incentive, that in many cases, it's not clear what the waste can be used for. And so therefore, I think in the beginning, we really need support from the governments. And this can be that that waste has to be analyzed for their content, for the content. It can be that there are specific incentives, subsidies for those companies that, for example, bakeries that use pommes. We know grappa, right? That's what was my relation to pommes in the beginning. And then I think once we have this machine going, then at least that is my experience in other industries. Then all of a sudden you think of how can you save save material, and how can you use waste as a material. But I think the food systems are different because of hygienic reasons and also smallholder farmers. So it's just also a different structure. And so I think in the beginning, we really need incentives from the governments, also what was mentioned already regarding calls, to get this mindset to create value from waste. I think this is the starting point. And once we have it, I think then it's running, because
it's running by itself. Okay.
Thank you. So, so the next question I would like to ask is to Sandra Schwindenhammer. So Sandra, you just briefly explained us the vision of the SUSCOLD project, which is, I mean, basically genius. There's so many nutrients in the wastewater which are otherwise not being used efficiently. So what is needed so that this vision of SUSCOLD becomes true and reality one day? So what political incentives do we need here? What is needed to foster this transformation of achieving the SUSCOLD reality?
Yeah, as I already mentioned, I mean, SUSCOLD itself is a bottom-up driver for political change. And I think we have to deal with this nexus challenges a bit more. Because when you look at the current policies, existing water governance framework have a slightly different regulatory focus. They are much on protection of surface waters and groundwater, and thereby they neglect the resources available in wastewater for liquid fertilizer production. And on the other hand, when you look at the food safety regulations, take the ALA principle, for example, they are quite too vague to cover this new technology. And so what we need is more policy integration. This is the one thing. And the other thing I would say, we also need different procedures of doing policies, because what we find in our research is that policy agents, act still in their spheres of control. They do not exceed the boundaries. And I think one potential thing would be to have more interministerial committees to deal with these cross-sectoral issues. I think,
Yeah, absolutely. Monica, you would like to add?
Yes, I would come from the policy to the technology. And my next question is to Johannes Isselstein. You use new technologies, the virtual herding technology, so intensive livestock farming could be replaced. So what do you think would be needed to promote that grazing is the new the new technology or the new way how we have cattle on the grass land?
Well, the focus should be on the farm, on the farmers and the community around the farmers. The society is expecting animals to be outside. They consider it as welfare keeping. Now, how do we approach the farmers? And that was a quite interesting thing, also related to the living lab story that was already raised, the topic, because we had these idea and we're really fascinated by our idea to use virtual herding and remote sensing so IT technologies to change the grazing situation. And we almost had gleaming eyes, came to the farmers and were talking about our ideas, and they were just not understanding it. Why should I? I mean, my animals are in the barn. So what? Where's the problem? And this is an indication of what we have to do if we would like to make a change. It requires communication that can be quite time consuming and can be also tiring, but we have to do, and this is not only to convince farmers from an idea that came up in a laboratory, but it's also to better understand the environment and the mindset of the farmers. So we have to get an idea of the mindset of the farmers. Farmers are caught in frameworks that they can't easily expand and change. So we have to understand their situation, and if we are going to disruptive innovations that change really production systems, then it can only be in a sort of living lab and interactive with the farmers.
So
this is an experience.
Yeah, so that means living labs is also a new kind of communication creator.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we have these talks now in COVID. We have these online meetings within our living labs. We have 3 of those, and there are the stakeholders, the farmers, and we are trying to understand the different positions, to get to know how the mindset of the people involved is, and then thereby we can, as Christian was saying, we need to have a common ground from where we start, and we have to have the stakeholders on board really to make a difference at the end and to get scientific insight into relevant processes in the practice.
So
thank you.
Thank
you so much. I think we are very short on time, I think. We just have, as far as I know from the program, 3 minutes left. So to sum it up, I would like to ask our speakers to put the most important aspects of fostering these transformations, maybe in a nutshell by giving us a closing statement. Christian, would you like to start? Give us a very brief closing statement with your thoughts.
It's difficult to summarize everything, but and to give the nutshell, because there are conversions of various levels. But to my mind, the key point is that we must first all realize that we have a huge responsibility of agriculture regarding environment. I think we have completely underestimated our impact, or huge impact on environments. We have a huge responsibility on climate, huge responsibility on biodiversity. We must just say, okay, we have this responsibility, but we are major level for changing the situation. And to go there, my recommendation would be, beyond everything we do in production of knowledge, everything we do in innovation, we must change the way we work with the value chain and the way we work with the citizens and the consumers. We must stop simply talking to the farmers, because if they cannot respond or answer to paradoxical demand, with the supply chain asking one thing and the society asking something different. So this is why, as I said, living labs are something that is a new approach, and also policymakers are part of the whole system, because they must design the policy for tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and not for this afternoon.
Thank you so much. Edeltraud, could you maybe give us your final remarks?
Yes, thank you very much. So 2 things. One, just a comment to the discussion we had regarding specific co-designing processes, committees between ministries and so on. I just wanted to add that we did a meta-analysis, and on the question how to implement corporate social responsibility in different sectors. And there was a clear result that a specific committee where different actors sit together has an impact on the sustainability outcome. So just to support what you said with empirical data. And my final statement is referred to the business perspective. I think we really need to calculate the full costs to change this mindset, that we do not just have waste and then calculate for the waste, but that we then also ask, how can we develop business models based on waste, what we call waste at the moment. So see waste as a resource. And I think what helps here also is that we really should also integrate the external costs of the current practices. And then what I already said, then I think it's the system is running just by itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Perfect. So then the last final statements from Sandra and then from Johannes Isselstein.
Okay, thank you. I had to just make it quick. I would say when we think about the bioeconomy, we have to take in mind that people are more than consumers. They are citizens. And in this regard, I would say the enduring success of agricultural transformation is inextricably also linked to democracy and also to the fair and equal and inclusive representation of societal concerns.
Thanks, great. Johannes, would you please?
Okay, 3 sentences. The agri-food sector has a future, as has been said, but also a huge responsibility for our resources worldwide. We have to find a common ground on which we have to agree upon with regard to the targets. So this requires communication. And based on this, we have to put ideas into innovations and development, and then use this to change the system. That's it.
Much. Thank you. So I think we're good with the time. So as far as I know, it works like that. I hope you all have been to the main room before entering this breakout. So in case this is true, we will now close this Zoom breakout room or this Zoom call, and we meet back in the main room just right after. So just one final sentence from me. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I hope it inspired you to some extent. We would, of course, like to continue discussing with you. So
right place
you find our contact details on our website here, also in the chat. Please get in touch with us.
I would suggest we
continue talking.
We wait for
so we see you back in the main room, okay?
For our colleagues to come back.